Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Harold Weghorst. I am with Lenzing and I'm leading the global marketing and branding initiatives with Lenzing. And I'm here today with Arizona Muse and Samata Pattinson. And please guys, can you introduce yourself briefly, starting with Arizona?
Of course. Thank you for having me. It's so nice to be here to chat about my favorite topic ever, sustainability, and particularly in the fashion industry, how we can all become more sustainable. I am Arizona Muse. I'm a model. I've been a model for a very long time. And partway through my career, I realized that I did not know enough about the clothes that I was wearing. So that was the beginning for me of my sustainability journey. I started educating myself, learning about the fashion supply chain, learning about the materials, particularly where these things come from. What is cotton really? What is cashmere really? How do we get them? And what is the process that turns them into clothing? All these questions needed to be answered. And it took me years and years and years and years of self-education to go really deep into what is fashion. And it's fascinating. Anyone on that journey will agree with me. Once you learn, you never go back. So now I turned my activism into education. I use my platforms on social media to share inspiration and what I'm learning about, which I find so inspiring. I've also started an organization called DIRT, Foundation for the Regeneration of Earth. DIRT works to regenerate soil globally as one of the most important things that we can do in the climate crisis. And DIRT does that by supporting the biodynamic farming movement, which is one type of regenerative agriculture. We can grow everything in a way that actually supports the function of ecosystems rather than tears them apart. And when I say everything, I don't just mean food, but the fashion that we wear as well. So that's what I've been doing with my time for the last 6-7 years now, and I love it more than anything in the world.
My name's Samata Pattinson. I am the CEO of Red Carpet Green Dress, and we're essentially a women-led organization that was founded by Susie Amos Cameron and James Cameron in 2009 when they were going to the Oscars. And they saw an opportunity for a very simple question: what are you wearing? To turn into a meaningful movement around analyzing how the things we wear impact people and planet. So we started as a tiny design competition that was really passionate about creating opportunities for emerging designers and educating established brands at the same time. And we've grown since then to cross over into educational work with fashion colleges and universities, brand collaborations, thought leadership work, material innovation with Tencel. And we're just really passionate about making sure that people can see their space and their belonging in the sustainability conversation, and that nobody feels that they aren't educated enough or don't have enough disposable income to participate in the conversation about sustainable fashion.
Great, thank you very much for that introduction, Samata. And I think we are among like-minded people, all very passionate about the environment and what we can do specifically to lessen our impact on the planet. So starting with that, there are, as you know, many claims about fashion being very unsustainable, and it's almost like the paradox between sustainability and fashion is not something which can go together. What are your views on that, and why do you think there is a urgent need to drive sustainability for the industry? And maybe we can start with Arizona. Arizona, could you start answering that from a consumer perspective?
Absolutely. I think that statement is true. Sadly, still in 2022, generally the fashion industry has not reached a point of sustainability at all. However, from a communications point of view, it's there. We are talking about it. It's a hot topic. Everyone wants to talk about sustainability. And I say that from true experience, because when I joined the sustainability movement 6-7 years ago, it was not cool to talk about it. It was boring. And I really felt that in my social life in the fashion industry. No one really wanted to hear about what I was interested in or learning about. And I would timidly start to talk about a book I was reading about sustainable fashion. And sure enough, I had about a minute and a half to talk about it before someone would kind of turn away and talk to the other person next to them at the fashion party. And it wasn't cool. But now everyone's clamoring to talk about it. And to me, that is an incredible leap and bound in the right direction, that at least it's common in conversation now. No one's running away from it. Everyone's running toward it. Of course, there are still some big mistakes happening in the direction that we're running toward it. Not everyone's running in the right direction, according to me. We have some work to do to define what truly is sustainable, because now that it's a word that's being thrown around so easily, it kind of gets used as a very specific label, or inspecific label, I should say, actually. So you have to dig deeper. When a person or a brand is saying, we're sustainable, I like to go beyond that and go, okay, so why? What are the details about what you're doing that is sustainable, that makes you be able to use that word? Because it's an unregulated word, so anyone can use it. We have to be careful about that. But in general, I feel positive, incredibly positive, that it's happening. There are organizations everywhere in this industry that are either new, popping up, or old and established, that are receiving more attention than they've ever received before. And we're all fighting the same battle, and we're going in a good direction in general.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that view. And you're completely right that, yes, sustainability is, although there's a lot of greenwashing because it's not regulated as such, but at the same time, there's much more attention to it. And that's so true. And that's a positive move. Definitely. For sure. Samata, from your perspective, could you shed some light on how it is for designers? What does it mean for designers, and how is their view on sustainability and fashion? How can they help to create a more sustainable future?
I think that's a really interesting question, and almost I like to kind of split that apart when we talk about designers and say, well, what kind of designers are we talking about, right? Because we work with, and I was a former self-taught designer who loved creating fashion, so I've been through the process of actually making clothing. I understand what it takes to produce a garment and the kind of loopholes that you go through to try and create something. And then when you factor in the fact that you're trying to embed sustainability into that, I understand the challenges. So I always try and take it apart and say, well, we could look at small independent designers, and then you can look at big kind of luxury brands and conglomerates, and what their perception of sustainability is and what their challenges are. And for us, one of the common kind of threads throughout that is, how far can you reach back and understand the process of what it takes to make a garment, and how involved can you be in ensuring that all of those different critical steps can have sustainability running through them? And when I use the phrase sustainability, I do believe it's a series of questions and answers, but I look at it through an environmental lens. So I look at it through the lens of how what we're extracting impacts the environment, how we're processing the things that we're making, etc. So impact on land, air, etc. But then I also look at it from the perspective of social impact. How is it impacting communities? How is it engaging communities? And I think when you're looking at it from the perspective of a small designer, they don't necessarily feel that they have that power and influence in some cases to reach all the way back to the beginning of that kind of value cycle or value chain, from the raw material extraction stage or the textile processing stage, and have input there and say, you know, how can we do this to impact and minimize impact on biodiversity? How can we ensure that, you know, when we're treating the textiles and processing them, that this is being done in a way that kind of reduces waste or uses non-harmful chemicals and dyes? So my experience with these smaller designers is either that they struggle to have that impact in those earlier stages, and so they try and control the elements that they can control, which is, well, when I source these materials and I manage to source materials that are sustainable, how do I interact with them? How do I cut them? How do I make? How do I trim to reduce waste? How do I educate the consumers that will be wearing my garments about how to look after them and make sure that they see this clothing tells a story that's meaningful and that I want them to hold on to for a long time? But then the experience we have with these kind of more kind of larger brands is they do have the power to reach further back and influence the value cycle much further back. And so it's almost, can we see the collaboration between big luxury brands reaching back and doing that and creating the means so that smaller companies can also have that same voice? So it's a very complex and nuanced thing, but one of the main pillars for us when we talk to creatives is, what is the message, what is the purpose of what you're making, and how much support do you need when it comes to either sourcing materials, how much support do you need when it comes to understanding and communicating impact, and how can we help you communicate to the people who'll be wearing your clothing what the impact of this garment is, and how they can become kind of almost advocates for sustainable fashion themselves. So it's definitely not an easy question to answer, and it's something that we see brands struggling with all the time.
Yeah.
Can I jump in again as the consumer and follow in on what Samata just said? Is that okay? I've found that knowledge is the thing that protects me from making poor decisions. And what I mean by that is when I found out the true process to make garments, which is what Samata was just walking us through, I now walk into a shop and I look at the clothes, and maybe it's a sparkly sequin dress, or maybe it's a bright pink jacket, and I know what sequins mean. I know that they came from petrochemical derived materials, which is directly supporting the oil industry that we all know is causing climate change. I know that the dye in those sequins is incredibly toxic to the people who were handling it, and to by the effluents that are let out of the factories afterwards. It is impossible to make a sequin dress, which takes a lot of embroidery, like a lot of embroidery and time to put it together. It's a very complicated structure. That doesn't feel right to me, to know that people made that and suffered. I mean, it's just, I don't even want the dress. It's easy. It's easy then to protect yourself from buying things that you know are harmful to people and planet. And it doesn't then, the point I'm making here is that being sustainable doesn't feel like a life filled with denial and boredom and scratchy stuff. Not at all. Like, I just don't even want it anymore. I want to find things that I'm proud to wear. And something I'm proud to wear was made by people who I know are paid fairly, who I know have a life with dignity, and who are working with chemicals that are not harming them at all. So non-toxic chemicals, organic dyes, they are out there now. It's easier than ever before to shop sustainably, because there are so many amazing people along the fashion supply chain who've said, no, I'm not going to do it the old way. I'm going to find new ways of doing this that will not harm the people who work with me, nor the planet that we all share. And it's exciting to be at this time of history. It really is.
It is. And thank you both for highlighting also the social aspect, because it's not only about the environment and reducing waste and reducing less CO2 emission, but it's also impacting about what impact we can create for the lives of people. And I agree with you, and that's also something both of you say. It's something that is complex. Making the right decision. It's not easy, because you can have, like you said, you can have a garment which is produced from the right material, but then midway in the whole process, through dyeing and coloring, a lot of negative environmental impact is added. So what is right and what is not? So thank you for that. And it also means that there's many steps in the process, and we need to work together to solve that. It's not something which can be solved by one step or by one person or one party in the whole value chain. It's all about collaboration. I have the privilege to collaborate with both of you, and I consider ourselves as environmental passionistas, if that word gives any meaning. I would like to ask you, and starting with Arizona, why did you join the Tencel Make It Feel Right movement, which is a movement we started with just that purpose, to educate consumers to find out more and to dig deeper?
I joined the Tencel Make It Feel Right movement because I have a long history with Tencel, always loved the material. It was one of the first materials that I was introduced to at the beginning of my sustainability journey, learning about, and I was really at the beginning. So just learning that viscose is made from trees, like that's a big thing to understand, that we can turn trees into fabric, and then learning that there are many different ways of doing that, and some of them are really harmful, and then Tencel is the least harmful because of this closed loop cycle with the chemical bath, but which of course you must have chemicals. That's why earlier I said non-toxic chemicals versus toxic chemicals, because it's not, we don't need to envision a future where we don't use anything chemical. I mean, everything is a chemical. Plants are actually made of chemicals. I am made of chemical reactions and water. And so we need to, the word chemical doesn't have to be scary at all. They just need to be used appropriately and suitably and in a very responsible way. And then, of course, we can look at the forestry as well. What kind of an impact can we have where we grow the trees? Because wood is a renewable resource in that it grows back again, which is great. But there are many different ways to encourage a forest to grow back again, and that can be more sustainable or less sustainable. And I know that Lenzing is incredibly responsible in their forestry. So I have this long history of working with Tencel as a fabric, and I've done plenty of design collaborations with brands where I've used a lot of Tencel actually, because it has so many amazing qualities as a fabric to work with. And so it felt so natural to do a social campaign that is promoting this fabric and helping to raise awareness that it exists and that it's an amazing alternative choice to many conventional cottons or conventionally made viscoses that are causing a lot of harm to planet and people.
Thanks for that. All very clear. Samata, you also are an ambassador of the Make It Feel Right movement, but our collaboration goes back also a couple of years. Yes. Could you elaborate on that and tell us how the collaboration between Tencel and Red Carpet Green Dress has been so far?
Yeah, definitely. So when I came on board with Red Carpet Green Dress in 2010, 2011, I was taken to a textile trade show by a friend of mine who was actually at the Cradle to Cradle Institute at the time. And he rushed me over to a particular section. He said, you have to know about this textile. You need to know about these fibers. You need to know about Tencel. And he explained it to me then. And I remember being in slight awe about the process and understanding where and how Tencel was made. But I also remember his like palpable excitement about it and his feeling that this is a solution, like this organization is consistent. They've got the right vision. And for me, when the opportunity to be part of this campaign came up, it was a no-brainer, because what I've always known about Tencel and Lenzing is the consistency of the campaigns and the work that you do. It's coming from a place of well-intentioned focus on sustainability, environmentally and socially. It's coming from a space of looking for real solutions. And I think we're in an industry where some of the solutions we're faced with are slightly gimmicky, or they aren't really accessible solutions that designers from all walks of life and from all socioeconomic backgrounds and across cultural boundaries can access and understand. So for me, Tencel kind of ticks those boxes of being accessible, being representative, but being a true solution. And I think the way that we kind of crossed paths and started to work together is because we work with luxury brands. And one of the, I wouldn't say challenges, but one of the grumblings we've been hearing from the luxury brands is like, we want a material, we want a fiber that delivers sustainability, that has a true story rooted in where it comes from, how it's processed and how it's delivered, but we can't find that performs and feels like luxury on the red carpet. And you and I kind of started talking about Tencel Luxe, and then we're introduced to this range of textiles and materials that are silky smooth, have a liquid-like drape, that can be classified as vegan, have color vibrancy. And so again, we have true solutions. And I think for me, sustainability, the message has to be strong. And what I loved about this campaign in particular is that you're really focusing on educating citizens. You're really focusing on people understanding and being able to participate. And I also like that you're collaborating with, influencers, but also NGOs, who I feel are often the unsung heroes of the sustainable fashion movement, but also just that these are real, true, accessible solutions. And so there's kind of nowhere to go from there, as long as we can deliver solutions that meet the needs of a growing fashion industry that wants to create clothing in multiple different ways for multiple different solutions and multiple different applications. Then I think we're on the right track. And you always do that. So I was just excited to be part of it, and to hear feedback from brands like Louis Vuitton or Vivienne Westwood saying we had no idea that this is what this was made from, like this fits in with our couture lines perfectly. That is a success story. So it's just been a joy working with you all, to be honest.
Thank you for that, and that feeling is mutual, definitely. We talked about the complexity for whether it's consumers or designers in making the right choice. Now we all know more, and we are able to see that that complexity and make the right choices. But how can we help? For example, how can we make sure that that designers are sufficiently up to date with knowledge to make the right decisions?
I would say that if we're looking at it from a designer perspective, we think about all of the relationships that interconnect with designers. We look at their raw material suppliers, we look at their retailers, we look at their citizens and their community. And at each of these kind of different faction points, we try and ensure that there's an honest knowledge transfer. I think in the fashion industry, we talk about collaboration a great deal. And one of the reasons, again, that we loved working with Tencel is because there's such transparency about processes. There's such transparency about information, that you've come across proprietary information, novel information. There's this sharing that allows us to then share on within our community. And I think with the fashion industry, that true collaboration has to really be that. It has to be open sourced. It has to be a willingness to share information with designers about processes, and for designers to then share information with their citizens about what they're doing. But also, I think the sustainability that we all truly need is an honest sustainability where we admit that there is no perfection. And so it means that designers can communicate out, these are areas that we're struggling with, these are areas we want to improve, and where the same thing with, textile providers, dye specialists, etc., can communicate and say, these are some of the challenges, these are areas we're really excelling, we're excited about, and these are areas we want to grow. Because then the conversation feels more authentic and it feels more honest, which I think is part of the challenge with sustainability right now. People don't know what to trust because it's all presented in a way that almost feels too perfect. So I think the authenticity is important, and just being willing to open source and truly collaborate across kind of even specialities. With Tencel, we work with you and we see you as scientists, we see you as creatives, we see you as academics, because you're bringing all of these different types of knowledge to our organization and to the partners we work with. So I think that openness to just receive information from different spaces and from different people will help us have kind of more generative conversations and just be more impactful as an industry.
I hear you saying, and openness, transparency are really key words in this, and as well as collaboration across the whole value chain. So thank you for that. Back to Arizona, could you shed some more light on how consumers can be more sustainable, and how can we help them with making the right choices?
Absolutely. So I like to see consumers, each single one of us, as someone who can shape the future of the industry. And I'll explain why. The industry, in order to change, it needs investment of money. And every single consumer, think of the amount of money that you will spend on the fashion industry throughout your lifetime. And it turns into quite a big amount of money, actually, that we all spend on the fashion industry. Now, if you can channel that money into the people who are doing the right things, you are actually making an enormous difference on the future of the fashion industry. So every time you make a purchase, think about that. You're helping money be a vehicle to trickle into the good businesses who are choosing good suppliers and whose money is going to people who are actually changing the world. That could be on a farm level. So where these raw materials are either farmed, or where the forest is, or where the animals are, those people, as the farmers, are having a very positive impact on soil if they're doing things regeneratively or organically, but they're having a very negative impact on soil and the life of ecosystems if they're farming conventionally using heavy-duty machinery and a lot of chemicals, synthetic fertilizers all year long. We do not realize how many times a year a field is sprayed with chemicals. It can be like 16 times a year that it's sprayed. It's crazy, and we have to stop that. So you are a consumer with immense power. Feel that empowerment. you can choose to support businesses who are helping to reshape fashion. And that's an amazing opportunity and privilege. So as a consumer, some of the practical things that you can do are read the labels. Always read the label of a garment before you buy it. You need to know what's in it. If you don't know the names of the ingredients, Google them. I had to do that many, many times. Sometimes they sound really complicated. What is polyamide? But you need to know what polyamide is. It's a synthetic. It comes from the petrochemical industry. We need to move away using it. Sometimes you can find recycled versions of polyamide, which of course are better because they're helping to reduce the amount of new polyamide on the market. However, it does take a lot of energy to recycle anything. So consider that as well, that recycling is not necessarily the end all goal for us in the fashion industry, but it's something that is slightly better, yes. Then also go further than reading the label and read the sustainability page on the website of the brand that you're buying from. And a tip to reading that page is, if you read through the first paragraph and you haven't learned anything, and it's kind of filled with fluffy information like la-di-da-di-da, we love the earth, la-di-da-di-da, and you haven't learned anything, that means they don't have enough to tell you about what they're doing. I also don't like to hear just about ambitions, like, oh, we want to do this. In 10 years, we will have done this. Okay, that's all fine and dandy, but tell me what you've done already. Tell me where you are now so that I know exactly what impact you're having on the environment and on people right now. So that's one tip for reading a sustainability page. And then also you can buy less. That's becoming really popular, which is amazing. Buying what you need. Just because you hear that there's a sale on doesn't mean you need to run out there and buy as many things as you can just because it's on sale. Think about the clutter in your wardrobe. That's what I like to think about when I'm like, oh, should I get it? Should I not? The answer is usually not, because when you get home and there's nowhere to put it and you're adding to the mess in your closet, you don't feel so great. And it just feels so good to do a closet clear out and then try to keep that tidy, spacious feeling in your closet. And you'll find that buying less is actually really enjoyable. Then also secondhand is like a cheat. If you need anything, first try to find it secondhand. And this actually goes beyond fashion. I have a secondhand salad spinner and it's plastic. So I don't feel badly about buying plastic when it's completely secondhand because I know I'm not contributing to the fossil fuel industry. So those are a few tricks that I use to become more sustainable. And as I said before, it's easier than ever to be a sustainable consumer now, because there are so many amazing businesses that are making sustainable products, using sustainable raw materials, supporting manufacturers who have good ethics when it comes to working conditions and fair pay. So it feels really much better to go shopping now than it used to.
Those are really valuable insights, and thanks so much for sharing that, because I think if consumers would follow those steps, indeed, they are able to make the right choices and contribute to a better environment. So thanks for that. We touch upon consumers, we touch upon designers, but we could ask the same question to businesses in general. How can businesses be more sustainable? And I think being part of the business, that's something I could answer, at least try to answer that. I think the key words already mentioned by Samata is transparency and also integrity, and that's something that Arizona, you also mentioned that don't use fluffy words because or don't talk only about ambitions, things you will do in the future. It is about the changes that we do today, and none of us are perfect, and we don't have to be perfect. But I think transparency is something which is lacking in the whole fashion industry, and I believe that's also something that we need to bring to the industry. Transparency for everyone in the whole value chain, including consumers, so that consumers are able to make the right choice. And I think by creating that transparency, we will also make visible where are the inefficiencies and where is the negative impact coming from. And then we're able to take that away. So I believe that is definitely one thing, one key element which businesses can contribute. And for that, we have to work together. So we as Lenzing, we believe very much in partnering for change. That's why we work with you, but we also work a lot with other businesses in the value chain, whether it's being the spinners, the fabric makers, NGOs, the retailers, brands. All of us, we have to pull our weight in order to improve the environmental impact and to improve also social circumstances in the value chain, because we often forget that. And thank you, Samata, for raising that point. But it's really, those are the key points for me, what businesses can do beyond a lot of other initiatives, but transparency and collaboration, that is very key.
And
okay.
Howard, can I just quickly add something to the end of what you've said?
Yeah.
And I think
sure.
one of the beauties for us, and I know that you're celebrating 30 years, which is incredible, is actually just seeing how omnipresent Tencel is as an organization. And when I say that, because we work across different categories, we work with fashion colleges, we work with educational institutions, we work with tiny brands, and we work with big luxury conglomerates, and we work across the world. So we work with talent in now it's over around 40 countries. And what I think is really important is there's a very consistent perception of Tencel and what it does. And I think that and when you talk about what businesses can do, that's part of what businesses can do. They can be consistent. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be flexible and able to change with the times, but like your core corporate culture and the pillars upon which you're founded, embedded in sustainability, means that really, and I'm sorry for the pun, but any kind of branch that shoots off from that is from that same tree. And so it's consistent in what it's delivering. And so our experience of working with Tencel has been fantastic, because it's been a couple of years and there's been a consistent experience of how can we do this better? How can we educate? How can we engage with more people? How can we create opportunities where people wouldn't necessarily even know that we exist? This is really uplifting stuff. And I know you and I have spoken about this, but I think the direction of the industry is definitely going towards a legislated space, because there are organizations like Tencel and Red Carpet, and we're doing these things voluntarily because we think there's no other way to do it. There is literally no other way to do it. And there are some organizations that don't necessarily have that same desire to do it voluntarily. So I think there is a need for us to move into a legislated space. And I know that's happening with like the Fashion Act and so on from New York. So it is an exciting time for businesses who are in it for the right reasons, because I hope with that legislation, they'll become kind of just more of a movement in the direction we're all hoping to go.
Yeah, true. I think, and thanks for raising that point, because legislation, I think, will bring not only a greater impact, but will also create more transparency. And that is, I think, very important, because it's rather obscure and it's not easy for consumers to make the right choice. And Arizona, you also mentioned that, recycled polyamide is good, but then at the same way, it costs a lot of energy to recycle, and in the end, it's still a fossil fuel, made from fossil fuel. So I think legislation will definitely help there as well, and I see that also as part of the collaboration, that we also collaborate with NGOs, but also with authorities in making the right decisions. Okay, I would like to go more towards a wrap up, but before that, I would like to ask you. We talk a lot about the things what we are doing or what we have been doing. If we look more into the future, what are you most excited about for 2022 and for the fashion industry?
What I'm most excited about truly is just a decentering of the conversation, and Harold, in our conversations we've talked about this, but as an organization that spans the world, there are so many missed opportunities for us to learn, empower, and just really credit and compensate some of the practices of sustainability that are taking place across this globe. And I think that even now, when we talk about some of these things, we talk about thrifting, we talk about secondhand, I always say there are cultures and communities that have been doing this for decades and millennia, and it's not a thing to them. It's just how they exist. And I think as we start to force out the lens of where we spotlight these conversations, where these summits take place, who we bring in to be our thought leaders and trailblazers and pioneers, we will be exposed to more cultural and global perspectives of sustainability that will inspire us. Because I think anyone existing in this space can sometimes feel, I'll be honest, a bit demoralized and a bit beaten down by big data and just what we're up against in a way. We need inspiration. We need stories of hope. We need different ways to tell the story of sustainability. A few of my friends were catching up about the film on Netflix called Don't Look Up, and I'm sure many of you have watched it, but this is the era we're in where we're looking at different ways to tell stories about sustainability that can inspire people. And I think the only way we can do that is if we don't keep relying on the same demographics to tell the stories. We open it up and we bring in people intergenerationally. We bring in people whose first language is not English, and we listen to them. Yeah. And I think that's what I have the most hope for, just hearing these stories and learning from different people and seeing how different communities interact with the solutions we have. I cannot wait to do something with Tencel where we're working with designers from the continent of Africa, for example, and we're seeing how that cultural influence is played into what they make with the materials that we give them, So I have a lot of hope, but it's all about embracing the globe in the least cheesy way, and not being so linear and narrow about where we look for our solutions.
Thank you for that. That's really nice, good insight. Arizona, would you, what is your view on that?
To answer your question, I think about what I'm excited about of the future, I think I'll just share with you where I'm at within my sustainability right now. I started my activism from a place of very environmentally focused and very materials focused, and what's the impact there, learning everything I could about biology and the effect on ecosystems, ocean pollution, ocean acidification, all of these things, which are incredibly important to understand. But then I realized that I was coming from my own very white, very privileged background, and I wasn't considering the other things, like the non-English speaking thing that you just mentioned, Samata. Everything I was reading was in English by authors who were English speaking. And I then began to broaden out my learning pool. And I started to deliberately seek out authors who were Native American, who were Black, who were coming from other parts of the world and other social economic backgrounds. And I cannot explain how it turbocharged what I was learning. Everything became deeper, more interesting, mind-blowing. I couldn't believe it, how different the content was. What was being said outside my narrow little circle was just, not to compare it, but so much more interesting, so much more interesting. And that really changed my whole perception on life, everything, parenting, what I eat, where everything came from. I looked at it in a different way, and it was incredibly humbling, and it's hard work. It does not make you feel comfortable. It doesn't make you feel good, but I feel like it's necessary, particularly for people from my background. We have to do this work. It's pretty much, it feels like the most important work I'll ever do, and I'll never be done doing it. It's not something that is finite, and that is actually a good feeling. It may feel scary in the beginning, but it will turn your world upside down, and it needs to be turned upside down, because maybe upside down is a better way to be. I'm really excited about decolonialization. That is kind of the word, I think, that sums up what I've been learning about. Then Black Lives Matter happened, and it became even more okay to be thinking about this and talking about this, and more access channels for it for white people, because I think if you're not white, you've had this at your fingertips always, but it wasn't there for me. And it was because I wasn't looking for it. And once I looked for it, it changed. So that's what I want to say, is that I am deeply excited about a future that is moving away from colonialism, moving away from domination into a partnership way, a way of life of business, of governing, that is totally different.
Thank you for that. I think that's a very powerful way to see what is ahead of us, and to see that openness is not only about, creating transparency in our space, but is also about being open to everything that is around us, and that there's so much more that we can learn and that we need to learn to improve the life of people and communities around us. I think there is hardly any better way to wrap up this conversation, and I would like to thank both of you for joining this chat and also for your very valuable contribution. Thank you so much.